I'm Aimee. It's nice to meet you.
And I'm Ella.
Hello.
And so our first question today is sort of like to start it off, sort of a description about your career as a filmmaker overall.
Sure. So my background was in photojournalism. I went to journalism school. I did an undergraduate degree after high school in political theory, and then I went and did a journalism program. I knew in journalism school, oh no, I made the wrong decision. I was like, I don't actually like this. I was a little bit idealistic. I thought by becoming a journalist, I would be able to write about any story I wanted to. And then you went in there and it's like it's a business and you got to write the stories they want you to write. And then they change the stories that you write to make them fit into what they want. And I thought, this sucks. I don't want this. So, but photojournalism, I picked up a camera. And that was the beginning of my career, because in high school I was so serious. I never took art. I was like, no, I'm going to take Latin instead of art because I'm going to be a lawyer. Anyway, so all of a sudden I picked up a camera and I went and covered a story. It was an anti-war demonstration in front of an art gallery, and 8 hours went by and it felt like 1 minute, and I was like in love. And I had no formal experience as a photographer. In journalism school, they give you a very basic 101 course, how to use it. But after 8 hours of filming, I hadn't taken any notes. All I did was shoot stills. I went back to the school. I asked the security guard to let me into the school at 10 o'clock at night. I went down into the basement, into the dark room. I opened up a book and I taught myself that night, following this book, how to develop the film. This was before digital, right? And that was it. I was like, I just found my thing. Like, I loved this because it was so powerful to me, because you were storytelling, but nobody was controlling what you were saying. And I just loved the freedom of it. So that took me off. And then that's how I met Petra's dad, Paul. I got it after the journalism program. I got a job in a newspaper working a darkroom. And every week I was taking like 50, 60 photographs for the newspaper, covering everything from extreme sports to entertainment. And I loved it. And I did that for many years. And then I decided that photography and photojournalism were like poetry, and I wanted to start telling stories. And so I got into documentary filmmaking, and I went back to school. I think I was like 39 or 40, and I went back to school and I did a 1-year program in documentary filmmaking. And I loved it, because my biggest complaint against journalism traditionally was that you had to condense everything down. You weren't giving people enough space, and you were changing their words. Suddenly I could point a camera at someone, just like you guys are doing at me right now, and let them speak for themselves. And this really excited me. And then you could also bring in music and these other elements, graphics, animations, whatever you're into. And I was hooked. But that's really how I got there. And I chose my topics, the adventure films, even before I went to university. That was just my personality as a kid. I loved nature. I loved going out into the woods. I always felt safe there. It just always also found like it was really easy to find myself. We spend so much time trying to be a certain type of person for people in the world, especially as women. We're taught like, be nice, say this, do this. And it's like you can lose yourself in that. I think it's great to be a kind person walking the planet, but you don't want to lose who you are, So when you're in nature, you get to peel away all those layers, right? So I always loved nature, but also as a storyteller, these adventure films come with an arc. They come with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And for a lot of people, it's hard to figure out, where's the beginning of the story? Where's the end of the story? But when you make stories like I do on these journeys, it's very easy to know where the beginning, the middle, and the end are, right? The beginning of the trail, the end of the trail, the beginning of the journey to the Arctic, the end of the journey to the Arctic. So I love that too. So for me, what my career is right now is I never would have known. I just kept following my heart. Oh, I like the photography. Oh, I like the writing. Oh, I love nature. And then one day I woke up and I realized that what I was doing for a living was all of those things, but I never set out, oh, I'm going to do this. I just kept leaning into following the things that made me excited, gave me joy, got me like, pumped for life, right? Because that's the trick, right? Like I said, you're living the perfect life if there's no division between your life and your work. I don't go to a job. My work is my life is my work. It's all one thing, you know? And to me, that's a ticket to happiness. And that's also a ticket to success, you know, enjoying your life that way and being true to yourself and giving yourself the things that you want, you know?
That's great. Thank you. Next, I mean, you've sort of talked a bit about it, but how did your passion for storytelling really begin?
You know, interesting too. I mean, as a child, as a young kid, I always kept a journal. And this was just nothing I took very seriously. I mean, this was just like where I wrote my feelings, or like, I'm really pissed off at my sister right now, you know, like just like wrote whatever was happening for me. But it was also a place where if I found like a cool sticker, I would put it, or like I found like a cool leaf, I'd stick it in there, or whatever. They were like these books that were collections of my thoughts and just different things, right? But I did them, and I did them like, I started like when I was like 10 years old, writing. And so what I learned over those years writing in my journal was how to communicate what I was feeling and thinking. Again, never thinking about it in terms of a career, right? But just learning how to give a written voice to my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts. And, you know, whatever you do, right, if you keep doing it, you're going to get better at it. And so I never really thought about writing a book or being a storyteller per se until my 20s. But by that point, I'd already, for 12 years, been doing these journals. So I had a vocabulary for it, if you know what I mean. Like I had this way of expressing myself. That wasn't a way that I was necessarily taught, but it's storytelling. And so, you know, I mean, it just lent itself, and, you know, all of it's storytelling. And I think if I lived a former life at some point, I was probably playing a drum by a fire, you know, telling these stories. You know, honestly, I think I come by it honestly. I think I've been a storyteller forever, you know, in many lifetimes, maybe, if there's such a thing, which I don't know. But, you know, it feels that way to me sometimes. Yeah, it just feels like I was meant to do what I'm doing. And I think when you lean into the things that you love, that's what your body and that's what your heart is telling you. If you love something, maybe this is the direction you need to go, right?
Yeah, that's great. So now kind of leaning into like some more specific work that you've done, what inspired you to take on the challenge of 500 days in the wild, and how did that journey transform you personally?
Well, 500 Days in the Wild, I mean, I'd already made a film on the world's highest mountain, and I'd made a film on one of the most northern coastlines in Canada. So, you know, when I heard about the longest trail in the world, it was like, ding, you know, like, okay, this has got my attention. My mom was the one that told me about the trail when it first came up. The idea came up. It was like in the 1990s. You could donate money and get your family name on a bench somewhere on the trail as a way of raising money to build the trail. And my mom did that. So I remembered that, and then I kind of forgot about that. But after filming on Mount Everest, when I came back, I thought, okay, I'm ready to look for my next film. And oh wow, this new trail, it's not officially open yet. No one's ever done it before. Like, what a great story idea. But other things had happened. So professionally, it made sense. Like I said, I'd done this and I'd done that. On my personal life, I also had some things going on. I'd been married for a number of years, and my marriage ended. And my dog of 16 years died. So everything holding me to one spot was gone. And I thought, well, you know, they say make lemonade out of lemons, right? I thought, well, I'm very sad that these things have, you know, my marriage has ended, my dog has died. But I also have an opportunity. I can actually go do this trail now. And I couldn't have done this trail if I'd been, it would have been very hard to expect somebody, if I was in a relationship, to hold space for me for that many years. Because it's kind of selfish. Like, it's not. Selfishness isn't a bad word. Selfish is like giving yourself your life, you know, it's a good thing. Out of balance, it's not a good thing. But either is not giving yourself the things that you want to do in life a healthy thing. So, you know, anyway, so I saw the opportunity for it. I had the space in my life for it, and I knew that, you know, yeah, and I needed a new film project. So it ticked off all the boxes, which it really needs to do, right? You're like, you come up with an idea and you go, okay, tick, it's another film, tick. It's like, well, I have time on my hands right now, tick. And this will also be a healing journey for me. I think anytime you go through big life changes, taking a little bit of time out is a really smart thing to do, whether you go on a trail or you just take yourself on a little holiday. Because one of the things when your life goes through major shifts that you want to know, one of the most important things you want to know is that you're making the decisions for your life from the healthiest expression of who you are, right? So if you're out on a trail, you're getting in shape. That's always a good, you're clearing out your mind. And so whatever would come next for me after this trail, I knew that when I would come back from this journey, I would be in a really good place to make healthy decisions for myself. And I learned that even in my 20s, like, when I was growing up, I would go and cycle my mountain bike 1,000 miles down a coastline or something whenever I was going through some major changes. And again, it was to get as healthy as I could so that the decisions I was making were from the healthiest expression of me. Because these are going to shape your life. So you want them to come from the healthiest expression of you, right? Your decisions that you make, the big ones that you make. You don't want to be pleasing people. We all want to please people. God, isn't it great when you can make other people happy? But the most important thing is to be true to yourself, right? So how do you do that? And find healthy boundaries and figure all that stuff out. So time away helps you do that, right? I always say when you're caught up in your life, we're like a mouse. Mice, they can only see what's right in front of their face, right? There's the cheese, That's all you can see. But when you take some time away, you get the vision of an eagle. All of a sudden, you got a wider picture, right? You can see your whole life, where you've been, where you think you might want to go. And that's the perspective you need when you're making big life decisions, right? You can't be that mouse. You got to see a bigger picture beyond the vision of the mouse, And these kinds of journeys, not only are they what I do for a living, but they help me evolve and grow and give me this perspective of an eagle, right, in my life, so that I'm always coming back to knowing that at least I'm trying anyway to make these decisions in my life from the healthiest place in me.
Thank you. Okay. So I did a bit of research on your 500 Days in the Wild.
Okay.
And I learned a bit about Vern Williams and Dianne Chambers. And would you like to just tell us who they are and how they changed your mindset on how we live our day-to-day lives?
Absolutely. So yes, Vern Williams and Dianne Chambers were together when I met them in 2015. And like I said, I had gone up there to show my film on Everest. And then, of course, after every film, I was like, what's next? And I told them about my next journey. And I also realized there was an opportunity that I was waiting for, which is I wanted to find an Indigenous elder that I could ask, right? Like, hey, how can I honor the ancestors? Because the last thing you want to do is the same. Oh, yeah. Good thing John's here. The last thing. Sorry, I just got to take my hat off. I got to take my coat off. I'm like sweating away here. Yeah, so anyway, Vern, that's where I met them, was when I was filming. And this was about 3 months. Was that okay? Good thing audio. That was about 3 months before I left on my journey, right? So it was amazing. I was already back east training, and they sent me an email saying, we want you to come. And they flew me all the way back there for this festival. And then anyway, so, in the past, in the Canadian government, whenever they thought they knew what was best for Indigenous people, and they imposed their ideas on them. And so I was like, well, whatever I might think, the first thing to do is to ask. Do not come up with the idea yourself. If you want to honor the ancestors, then go and ask them. Go ask an Indigenous person how to do this, right? So the opportunity came with Dianne and Vern. And they brought me home to their home, and we talked for a while, and then I went for a walk. And that's when Vern gave me his feather. And they also taught me how to smudge, which I didn't get into today because it's a whole other, I had a very short period of time to cover this story. But smudging, I don't know if you know what it is, but a lot of Indigenous people do smudging. And it's in a shell, and they put cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and wild tobacco into the shell, and they light it, right? And when the smoke starts to be produced, they use the feather to blow the smoke, and then they start cleansing themselves with this. And it's a symbolic gesture, right? That's all ritual is a symbolic gesture. But what it is doing is cleansing. So, what happens is in life, it's like, well, yesterday I was walking down the street and that person, they gave me the finger or whatever. You're still stuck in yesterday. You wake up in the morning and you smudge, you're letting go of that. You're starting fresh. So if you see that same person, you're not holding what happened yesterday into this moment. It's a new moment now. You've smudged all that away. Yesterday's gone. So now you see that same person and you might have a different interaction. Yesterday it was an unpleasant one, but now it's a new day. And so today it'd be like, hey, how you going today? And you've opened up the opportunity for something to evolve and to shift and be different. This is the power of this ritual of smudging, right? Cleansing, cleanse your eyes, cleanse your ears. And the one for me that was really powerful as a storyteller is when you cleanse your mouth, be mindful of your words, be mindful of what you say, right? It's very important. So they taught me how to smudge. And he said, you know, carry this feather and smudge, because smudging will keep you grounded. So I did those things in honor of what I was asked, and that's how I met him. But, you know, even back in the day when I was working with Paul and Petra's and Malaki's dad in Whistler, even back in the 1990s, I was always really interested in Indigenous issues and advocating for Indigenous people in my culture. It was obvious to me that the story of what had happened to these people was horrible. I do have some Indigenous ancestry in my family, but as I said, like in our culture, if it's not your grandmother who's 100% Indigenous, you don't say you're Indigenous, you say you have ancestry. And so I have ancestry, and I'm proud of that ancestry, proud of all my ancestry, but I also really believe that their relationship to the earth, the way of looking at it, is something that's sacred. Of course, I mean, if we're going to save this home of ours, we have to see it that way. If it's just a commodity, no one looks after it. But if you say, like, the water is sacred, and you think about it, I mean, what does the word sacred mean? And, you know, what is sacred? Well, the things that sustain life are sacred, and not just for us, but for all life. And so that really resonated with me. Like, I find my hope in the ideas and the paradigm, the way that Indigenous people look at the world and the relationship to the natural world. But I also don't like to put one culture over another, and that's why I like the two-eyed ways of seeing. It's instead of saying I'm better or this is better, it's about bringing everything together, right? And imagine, like, I demonstrate through my films how you need the two of them to get through danger in the Arctic. You need the two of them to get up Everest. And in my journey, I needed the two of them to survive. I needed this, but as far as my hope for our future, it comes from this merging of these two ideas, right? Of honoring that kind of wisdom from the past with the technologies of the future, you know?
Yeah, that's lovely. So what are some of the most unexpected lessons or moments throughout your entire career, like of connection, that you experienced during your time in the wilderness and just everything you've done?
Well, I can tell you one story. There are many, but I'll tell you one story. And this story isn't in the film, but it will be in the book. So you'll hear something that people don't get to hear often. So I failed camping school when I left on this journey. Like, on 500 days, in the first 3 months, I lose 5 tents. I'm like, it's funny in the film, but I am feeling like I am failing camping school badly here. Like, what am I doing? And, you know, one tent, the windows all blew out because it was a glue malfunction or whatever. So it's not like all my fault, but like they just kept going down. I'd have to carry these broken ones, try to find a new tent, you know, and usually it was just through the kindness of other people. But anyway, I'm on tent 5 now. And I'm like 1 month before the end of my first trail, which was like this 1,000-kilometer trail in Newfoundland. And I'm about a week before the end of it. And I've been on my mountain bike for this section all day. And I get to this little town, and this town is one store. It's called St. Fintan. One store in this whole town. And I look and I'm like, oh my God, my tent's gone. Like, I had it strapped to the back of my bike, and honestly, like, I probably lost it because I just didn't strap it on tight enough, okay? So I'm seriously, like, having a bad day, And I'm like feeling so bad about myself. I'm like, you're such a, it's like, anyway, and I go into the store and there's Newfoundland women, and Newfoundlanders have an accent. It's kind of an Irish accent. Anyway, I go in and they're all kind of like in their 50s and 60s and 70s, older women like me. And I say to these women, like, they're like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, oh my God, I'm on this bike, I'm on the trail, and I just lost my tent. And they're like, no worries. Just have a seat, dear. We're going to get on the phone and we're going to call the people up that have ATVs and they're going to go out there and find your tent. So she gets on the phone. All these people go out and they go to look for my tent, right? They come an hour later, they get a phone call. No tent. So now I know I've got 1 week, no tent. There's so many bugs. Like, I am going to get eaten alive, man. Okay? Like, it is not a good time happening for Dee at all. So I go back out there, all forlorn, and I grab my mountain bike, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And in that moment, this old red pickup truck pulls up. It's like from the 1970s, old red pickup truck. And inside it, there's a man with a long gray beard. And I can see he's looking right at me, so I stop. Clearly this man has got something to say to me. And he reaches over and he grabs something and he opens up his car door and he starts walking towards me, and it's a 12-man tent, okay, in a box. It hasn't been opened yet. And I'm like thinking, first thought, there's no way I can bring this tent with me. It's like massive, right? And then I'm thinking, oh, yes, you can, because you don't have a tent, and it'll be a lot better than like getting eaten alive, right? So just as I'm thinking all this, thinking is going on in my brain, I realize, I start feeling something in my throat, and I realize this is a sad man. I can see his eyes. It looks like he's crying, and I don't know about you, but when I'm around a person who's really sad, I can feel it in my throat. Like I can feel their sadness, and I'm feeling his sadness. I'm like, I've gone from like all these different emotions to suddenly like what is happening here with this man? And my heart chakra, just like my heart, just like, what's happening? And he just, literally, he's crying and he gives me this tent and he says, bless you, and runs away. Gets back in his truck and drives. And I'm standing there with this big box going like, what the hell just happened? So I walk into I turn around, first of all, and all the old ladies working in the store, they're like, faces are up against the window, right? Like, just like watching the whole thing, and they're all crying. So now I got to know, like, what's going on, right? So I walk into the store and I'm with this big box and I'm like, what just happened, right? And they, crying, say, 3 months ago, his daughter was graduating from high school and she was killed in a car accident the night of her graduation. And that tent, he bought her for her grad present. And he heard that you lost your tent, and he went and he got you that tent. All that armor that I'd built up around my heart, like I cried thinking about it, just boom, right, fell down. Because of his kindness, right? Those are the moments that changed my life.
It's really nice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you.
Because you realize we all need each other, right? He needed me in that moment as much as I needed him. And it was my vulnerability that opened the door, not my strength. I had to be vulnerable for that to happen. And I guess that's what you realize, right? We all want to like be pros all the time at what we do, but it's our vulnerability that lets the light in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and connects us all.
That's right. Exactly. So that was definitely a big one. You can see I still talk about it. I don't talk about it very often because every time I do, it's 10 years ago, and it's that saint. I call him the saint of St. Vincent, that man. But anyway, yeah, it still makes me cry.
What has filmmaking brought to your life far? Huh? Sorry. What has filmmaking brought to your life?
What has filmmaking brought to my life? Oh, it's experiences, and that's all life is, right? I always like to say the reason why I love my profession is there's no failure. Let's just say I go out to make a film or write a book, and I come back and the film doesn't get made, or it gets made and no one wants to see it. I still had the experience, right? Nobody can take that away from me. I've been to the Arctic, I've been to Mount Everest, and I've now done the longest trail in the world, man. Like, I did things that I didn't even know I could do, by just giving myself the opportunity to try to do them, you know? So that's what it's given me. I mean, it's given me the experiences that have shaped and formed me, right? And yeah, it's given me a great life.
Super.
So, how do you balance the solitude of your adventures with the collaborative nature of filmmaking and that industry?
Great questions. You know, I mean, it's like the yin and the yang. We all are seeking that balance all the time, right? Between the quiet and the active. And so this really lends itself that way. I'm kind of an introvert in the sense that someone explained to me, introverts are people that, it's not that you can't be a social person if you're an introvert, but that it depletes you. And that if you're an extrovert, when you're social, it actually gives you energy. So I need both because I'm an introvert, really. I mean, I'm comfortable spending time on my own. And as a writer and an artist, you kind of need to be, because you need that solitude in order to create the work. And then at the same time, in post-production, what I really love is the collaboration, working with a sound designer, working with an editor. Like, the most profound experience is working with an editor in a film, right? It's, you get in there and you're crafting story together, and I've worked with a couple of different women, and yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the filmmaking process, apart from actually filming, which I really enjoy as well. Yeah, I guess we're all seeking that balance, you know what I mean? And my career really gives, I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example of it, because I'm either really alone or I'm really with a lot of people. But it works for me, you know what I mean? And where I live quite remotely too. So my studio is an old barn in the forest, you know. So even where I work, I get to work alone a lot. And but I'm also in a relationship, so you know what I mean. You find those balances, but yeah, I need that time. I think we all do. You know, being alone is where you can unpack. Is this feeling right for me? You know, do I need a new boundary with this person? Because every time they're around, I feel like I'm not able to speak my truth or whatever. Like, you're right, you need to check out, to check in sometimes, you know. And you don't, it doesn't have to all be about being 6 years in the bush, but I think growing comfortable with being by yourself sometimes, just to be yourself and find out who that person is, and not to lose that person on your journey, you know, by trying to make other people happy all the time is really important.
Yeah. And then, in what ways do you hope your work impacts audiences, particularly regarding their relationship with nature and the environment in our world?
Well, first and foremost, as a woman in my age, it matters to me that I don't make stories that scare people. I mean, it's okay to have adventure and some moments of danger, but I make stories that I definitely want to give people hope. I want people to have hope. I feel like that's my responsibility as a storyteller. People are afraid enough. You know, it's about healing that right now for me. But the other things that are really important are some of the themes I talked about today, which is like new ideas moving forward for sustainability that are inclusive of more people. So this idea of the two wide ways of seeing, of blending Indigenous knowledge with, you know, the modern world, for instance, and giving it equal weight, you know, even. And the ideas of, you know, nature, the fact that we are just 0.01% of all life on Earth, and we are part of this web of life. Those kinds of ideas. It's easy to forget when you live in a city with 10 million or 5 million or whatever, right? Feel pretty disconnected from the web of life when you're living in concrete all the time. And increasingly, I'm seeing that, you know, we're not taught that the tree is sacred. We're taught that the tree is lumber. We're taught that the mountain is rock for minerals, you know. And this is problematic, because if you don't teach that something is important, then we're not going to look after it. And, you know, we live finite lives, right? So you're the future, right? So if I get to come in here and even one of you out of the 500, 400 people I spoke today moves forward in you know, these ideas of like bringing Indigenous knowledge and science and technology together, or this idea of the web of life and how important it is that we sustain the importance of these things, all of it, then I've succeeded, you know what I mean? Inspiring someone is the highest goal, I guess, way of measuring success in what I do, you know, is everybody's just, you know, these are all I do is like, I put seeds in the wind, you know. You don't know where they're going to land, and you don't know where they're going to grow, and you don't know what they're going to grow into. but all of it is with the hope that we're going to be moving into a better place for us all. And right now it's like time to step it up. But yeah, and not to give up hope, right? And to believe in yourself, and to believe that, I think one of the great things about them bringing these speakers into you guys is that you get to just meet, they're just people. It's so like, oh, like it all seems so unattainable when it's like somebody's like, oh, Jane Goodall, or oh, whoever. But when you meet these people, they're just people, And so it makes you realize that, like, yeah, anything anyone has accomplished, so can you. It just means that you got to find your way. The way that you might do something. It's like an extreme athlete might do that trail that I did in 6 years in 2 years. But who cares? It's not about how fast it is. It's about what's the most meaningful way, right? For me as a storyteller. So it's just about encouraging people too to like break some of those limits, those glass ceilings that we impose on ourselves. This is what I can do. I can't do that. I can do this, but you can do anything, man, And when you meet people that have achieved these things, it kind of demystifies it, if you know what I mean, It's like, yeah, it's doable. It's not magic.
So looking towards the future after your last movie, do you have any projects or other, ideas that you're thinking about?
I do. I'm not going to talk about my next film yet because I'm still about a year and a half away from probably starting it. And so I don't like to talk about things until I'm actually doing them. But I can tell you that, as I mentioned, I've written books on my other films. So right now, starting in January, I'll be writing a book on this one. And also, like, I do have a sales agent, but I own a lot of filmmakers are just either the director or whatever, but I actually own my own production company, and my company owns my films. So I'm also very involved in distributing and selling my film internationally. So the only country in the world that has this film right now is Canada. So I got a lot of country, we're close to selling it in the UK, we're close to selling it in Germany, but we got to sell it in Switzerland. So, there's a lot of that kind of work involved in it as well. So I probably have, I'll be writing the book for a full year. I filled over 100 journals in my time out there. So I'm really looking forward to writing the book. And they're always really different than my films. So you get to talk about, just like that story I shared. I don't know if it'll make the book or not, but there's all those moments that I don't have on film that were just as profound in shaping my journey and shaping me. So I look forward to being able to sort of tell some of those stories too. So yeah, next year's all about writing the book and hopefully getting this film into more countries.
Cool. Okay, and one last question. What advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers or adventurers looking to merge their creative passions with personal challenges and just who want to push themselves?
Just do it. To borrow from Nike, really, just do it. And start small, right? Why? If you, make a 1 minute before you make a 5 minute, make a 5 minute before you make a 10 minute, One of the reasons why I always like to start 500 Days in the Wild by referencing my other projects was they were, I was on Everest for 40 days. I was in the Arctic for 30 days. So this was a lot, 5-6 years is kind of like way more extreme, but I had already it gave me the confidence, right? So because I made it through the Everest one and the films came out and I made it through the Arctic one, that gave me the confidence to even dream in this next one. So start, obviously you got to, and give it to yourself. Don't try to wait like, oh, I'm going to get this job and then this person's going to give me this opportunity. Do it yourself. Create those opportunities for yourself. You want to merge your passions, then get a camera, make a 1 minute, put that 1 minute in festivals. Who cares? Put the 2 minute in festivals. It goes under the short film category. Just start doing it. Because whatever you do, you're going to grow at, right? What we feed grows. What we stop feeding dies. So wherever you put your energy is you're gonna, and it applies to relationships too, right? The relationships you feed grow. The ones you stop feeding die. So yeah, feed it. Feed it a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.